You know that strange moment when your eyes see something so wrong, so blatant, so confidently illegal, that your mind refuses to accept it at first? Not because you do not understand what happened, but because accepting it means admitting someone crossed a line so openly that the world suddenly feels tilted. That was exactly how I felt the morning I came back to my property and found my private parking lot painted like it had always belonged to the Oak Ridge Pines HOA. The smell reached me before I even stepped out of my truck. Fresh traffic paint. Sharp. Chemical. Still warm in the morning air. It burned the back of my throat when I opened the door. My boots touched the asphalt and stuck for half a second, just enough to tell me the bright white lines were new, still tacky, still drying, still pretending to be permanent. I stood there with my keys in my hand and stared at the lot I had owned for 10 years. A plain commercial parcel at the edge of Oak Ridge Pines. Nothing glamorous. Nothing dramatic. Just land I had bought, paid taxes on, insured, repaved, sealed, repaired, maintained, and defended through every annoying municipal headache that comes with owning property people only notice when they want to use it. Yesterday, it had been mine in the same quiet way it had always been mine. This morning, it had been carved into numbered spaces with arrows, will stops, and a shiny new metal sign bolted into my asphalt that read HOA reserved parking. For a few seconds, I honestly did not move. I just looked at the sign, the fresh stripes, the tire tracks already cutting through wet paint, and the silver Lexus parked crookedly in space number 4 like some wealthy resident had been personally invited to test how much disrespect I could swallow before breakfast. Then I heard the heels. Slow, deliberate clicks against pavement. Not rushed. Not nervous. Satisfied. Rebecca Lawson came around the clubhouse access path with a clipboard tucked under one arm, sunglasses covering half her face, pearl earrings, an immaculate white blouse, and the kind of soft, poisonous smile people wear when they want their disrespect to look professional. Rebecca had been HOA president for less than a year, but she had already turned herself into a local storm system. Violation letters for trash cans visible by 1 inch. Threats over mailbox shades. Fines for weeds after rainstorms. Public shaming posts about community standards. She used that phrase the way other people use a hammer. She stopped 10 feet from me and let her eyes move over my truck, my boots, my expression, and the sign she had planted in my property like a flag. We had to bring this area up to community standards, she said. Calm. Polished. Like she had performed maintenance instead of trespassing. I looked at her, then at the lot, then back at the sign. 2 board members stood near the sidewalk behind her, pretending to be official while avoiding eye contact. A landscaping crew down the block slowed just enough to watch without looking like they were watching. Rebecca waited. I could feel it. She wanted me angry. Loud. Messy. She wanted the scene. People like Rebecca do not just take space. They choreograph the argument afterward. If they can make you look emotional, they can make themselves look procedural. So I gave her nothing. I walked slowly to the nearest signpost, crouched, looked at the bolts sunk into my asphalt, stood back up, and asked, "Who authorized this?" Her smile barely moved. The board voted on parking improvements after repeated concerns about overflow congestion. On my property, one of the board members shifted his weight. Rebecca's chin lifted a fraction. This area has historically served the neighborhood entrance and clubhouse zone. The board determined it was appropriate to formalize usage. Formalize usage. That was her phrase. Not purchase. Not lease. Not agreement. Formalize usage, as if stealing became administration when you said it with enough confidence. I felt my hand close around my keys until the metal teeth pressed into my palm. Rebecca noticed. A tiny flash of satisfaction crossed her face before she covered it. She thought she had found the pressure point. She thought I was about to explode. And right then, I understood this was not really about parking. This was a test. Rebecca had decided I was close enough to Oak Ridge Pines to control, but far enough outside the gates to intimidate. She had probably told the board I would complain, maybe threaten an attorney, maybe send one angry email, and then eventually accept reality because the paint was already down and the signs were already installed. That is how people like her win. They do not always win by being right. They win by making the wrong thing feel too exhausting to undo. I looked across the lot again. Every line, every number, every unauthorized sign, every little symbol of her confidence. Then I nodded once. Okay, I said. Rebecca blinked. It was quick, almost invisible, but I saw it. She had prepared for outrage. She had not prepared for quiet. "Okay," she repeated. "Okay," I said again, and walked back toward my truck. Behind me, one of the board members muttered something under his breath, and Rebecca gave a small, controlled laugh, meant to travel just far enough. "I'm glad we can be reasonable," she called. I opened my truck door, paused, and looked back at her standing in the middle of my lot like a conqueror posing for a portrait. "Reasonable is good," I said. Then I got in, started the engine, and drove away slowly enough to see her in the side mirror. Her shoulders relaxed. Her clipboard rose. She turned back to her little audience as if she had just handled me. I let her have that moment. I let her believe silence meant surrender. Because Rebecca's first mistake was painting my property. Her second mistake was assuming the parking lot was the valuable part. The county records office sat behind the courthouse in a squat brick building that looked like it had been designed by someone who hated sunlight. Inside, it smelled exactly the way government archives always smell: dust, old paper, toner, and decisions nobody remembers making. By noon, I had survey maps, deed copies, tax plats, easement records, zoning overlays, and original development files spread across a metal table beneath fluorescent lights that hummed loud enough to feel like pressure inside my skull. The parking lot issue was easy. Too easy. My name was on the deed. Boundaries were clean. No transfer. No shared use covenant. No HOA annexation. No maintenance agreement. No amendment. Nothing gave Oak Ridge Pines or Rebecca Lawson one legal inch of authority to paint, sign, assign, or occupy that lot. Any attorney could have destroyed her position in 10 minutes. But I did not stop there. People who grab property usually miss something bigger than the thing they grab. They focus on what they want, not on what connects everything around it. So I kept digging. I pulled the original 1987 development file from back when Oak Ridge Pines was a half-built subdivision wrapped around a private clubhouse and a man-made pond the developer used to make ordinary houses feel exclusive. I pulled access easements, stormwater documents, utility corridors, road dedication notes, maintenance agreements, and every recorded instrument tied to the entrance road curving past my parcel before feeding into the neighborhood's main boulevard. Most of it was boring. Boring is good. Boring documents are where careless people lose. Then I found the line. One line in an easement record older than most of the people now living there. The only paved access road into Oak Ridge Pines crossed the eastern edge of my parcel for 112 feet before connecting to the internal private road system. The document granted limited ingress and egress to the development, subject to maintenance participation, non-interference with the owner's retained rights, and reasonable access conditions established by the owner, provided emergency clearance remained available. I read it once, then again, then a third time, slower. Every car entering that neighborhood crossed my land first. Every resident, every contractor, every delivery van, every board member. Rebecca herself. Not public land. Not HOA land. Mine. And according to the original terms, the association had been using that strip for decades without updating the agreement, without properly contributing to maintenance, without formalizing modern traffic volume. And now their president had just trespassed onto another part of my parcel and created the perfect reason for me to revisit every ignored condition. That was when my anger cooled into something far more useful. I could have called Rebecca right then. I could have sent a demand letter. I could have ordered the signs removed and billed them for repairs. But that would have made it a dispute, and disputes are where people like Rebecca thrive. They create committees. They twist timelines. They say miscommunication. They bury simple facts under enough noise that half the neighborhood stops caring who started it. I did not want noise. I wanted sequence. I wanted documentation. I wanted Rebecca's confidence to keep walking forward until there was no graceful way to retreat. So I made certified copies. I requested the full survey package. I pulled county requirements for private access control gates. I checked emergency clearance codes, fire department lockbox rules, motorized gate specifications, setback limitations, signage requirements, and notice procedures. I called a contractor I trusted, the kind of man who does not get impressed by drama because concrete, steel, and liability have already taught him patience. By 3 o'clock, I had a plan that required no shouting, guessing, or bluffing. By 5, I had measurements. By 6, I had confirmation that a gate could be installed fully on my retained property line, without blocking emergency access. By sunset, I was parked down the road from Oak Ridge Pines watching residents glide in and out without slowing. Every one of them crossing that strip of asphalt as casually as breathing. They did not know. Of course they did not know. Access is invisible when it works. Ownership is invisible when nobody challenges it. Rebecca had made the same mistake, only with more arrogance. She mistook routine for right. Over the next 2 days, I behaved exactly the way she expected a defeated person to behave. I parked on the street. I did not remove the signs. I did not confront the board. I let HOA members use my lot. I watched them get comfortable. Comfort makes arrogant people careless, and careless people document their own downfall. I took photos with timestamps. I filmed board members parking in the new reserved spaces. I saved screenshots from the HOA community page where Rebecca proudly posted, "Overflow parking issue resolved thanks to decisive board action." Residents thanked her for reclaiming the lot. Reclaiming. I circled that word in red ink and placed it in the file. Every morning, I drove past the access road and measured it again in my head. The width, the slope, the shoulder, the drainage cut, the exact point where steel posts could stand without violating clearance. Every evening, I checked the permits moving through the county system. Nothing rushed. Nothing sloppy. No emotional move she could frame as retaliation. Just paperwork, inspections, approvals, records, photographs, and a quiet countdown Rebecca could not hear. But on the second afternoon, the first real moment of doubt hit me. My contractor called and said the county planner had flagged the file for review because neighborhood access implications could complicate approval. For one long minute, standing beside my truck with the sun beating down on the roof, I felt the entire plan wobble. If the county froze the permit, Rebecca would win the most dangerous kind of victory, not because she was right, but because delay would protect her. She would keep using my lot while the county reviewed concerns. The HOA would post statements. Residents would settle into the painted spaces. My property would become a legal waiting room. I drove back to the county office with a folder under my arm and the strange calm you get when losing is suddenly possible. The planner was not hostile. That was worse. Hostile people can be argued with. Cautious people hide behind process. He asked about emergency access, resident ingress, potential liability, public safety optics, and whether I understood how disruptive a controlled gate might be. I answered each point with records. Fire clearance, lockbox compliance, owner retained rights, permit placement, recorded easement language, non-interference clause, unauthorized alteration photographs. The planner read silently for several minutes. I could hear the old wall clock ticking above his desk. Finally, he looked up and said, "You understand this may become a civil fight." "It already is," I said. "I'm just making the property line visible." He stamped the file conditional approved. That stamp hit the page softly, but to me it sounded like a door unlocking. On the third night, under a moonless sky and a stillness that made every sound feel deliberate, the first truck rolled in at 3:12 a.m. with its headlights low. I was already there, standing beside survey stakes marking the line Rebecca had never bothered to find. The crew moved efficiently. No loud talk. No confusion. Men who had seen property disputes before understand the safest way through them is precision. The auger bit into the ground with a low mechanical growl. I felt the vibration through my boots as the first post hole opened exactly where the permit allowed. Then the second. Then the third. Steel posts came off the truck one by one, dark and heavy, landing with muted metallic thuds that sounded like punctuation. Damp soil mixed with machine oil. Brackets tightened. Concrete set. The motor housing was mounted. A keypad pedestal rose near the shoulder, its blank face waiting to become the most important object in Oak Ridge Pines. I stood there with the certified easement copy folded in my jacket pocket and watched ownership become visible. Nothing about the law changed that night. My rights had not suddenly appeared. They had always been there. Rebecca's arrogance had simply forced me to use them. Just before dawn, the gate frame lifted into place. Heavy, black, perfectly aligned. Not decorative, not flashy, just solid enough to make denial difficult. By 5:15, the keypad glowed soft green in the dark. By 5:30, the crew was gone, taillights fading down the county road. The neighborhood beyond the gate still slept. Every house, assuming morning would work the way mornings always worked. Sprinklers ticked behind the entrance wall. A garage door groaned open somewhere inside. The sky paled behind rooftops. I stood beside the keypad with my hands in my pockets and waited. The first car came at 6:04, a gray sedan rolling toward the exit at ordinary speed until the driver saw the gate and braked hard enough for the front end to dip. For 3 seconds, nothing happened. Then the driver leaned forward, confused, looking left, right, down the shoulder, searching for a way around that did not exist. A second car stopped behind him. Then a third. Brake lights glowed red in the morning haze. Doors opened. Voices started low and uncertain. Someone laughed once, like this had to be a mistake. Then the first horn sounded, short and sharp, cutting through the quiet like a crack in glass. I looked past the growing line of cars toward the sleeping houses waking one by one, and I knew Rebecca Lawson was about to learn that painting lines is easy. Crossing one is expensive. The second horn came longer and angrier than the first. After that, the entire entrance unraveled faster than anyone expected because traffic panic spreads through a neighborhood the way smoke spreads through a hallway, quietly at first, then all at once. More cars rolled down from inside Oak Ridge Pines, slowing abruptly as drivers realized the line was not moving. Engines idled. Reverse lights flashed. Doors slammed. People stepped out with coffee cups, briefcases, gym bags, half-buttoned jackets, all carrying that irritated disbelief people get when routine betrays them before breakfast. The steel gate sat across the road without emotion. The keypad glowed beside me like it had been there forever. Then Rebecca appeared. I saw her white SUV before I saw her face, weaving through stopped cars until she parked crooked near the shoulder and climbed out faster than I had ever seen her move. No sunglasses this time. Her hair was pinned back hastily. Coffee in one hand, phone in the other. When she reached the front and looked directly at the gate, she stopped so abruptly, it almost looked like she had walked into something invisible. For one full second she just stared. The posts, the hinges, the keypad, the county permit plate mounted cleanly on the side column. Then her eyes found me standing beside it, calm and waiting, and I saw the exact moment recognition hit her. Not confusion. Recognition. Because people like Rebecca know instantly when a situation has escaped their control. "What is this?" she demanded. "Access control," I said. Her eyes narrowed. "You cannot block a residential entrance." "I'm not blocking it. I'm managing access across my property." A few residents near the front exchanged looks. Rebecca stepped closer, heels clicking hard now, her polished composure cracking at the edges. "Move it," she said through clenched teeth. "Now." No, just that one word. Calm. Simple. It landed harder than yelling ever could have. Behind her, another horn blared. Someone shouted that they were late for work. A teenager leaned halfway out a passenger window, filming everything. Rebecca glanced back at the growing audience and visibly recalculated. Public embarrassment changes people fast, especially people addicted to authority. "You are creating a liability nightmare for yourself," she said. "Everything here is permitted." I nodded toward the approval plate. Emergency clearance maintained exactly to code. Her eyes flicked to the plate automatically. That tiny movement told me she had not expected paperwork. She had expected emotion. Emotion she could fight. Documentation was different. "This road serves the entire community," she snapped. "And it crosses my land." I held up the certified copy. Recorded easement. Retained owner rights. Reasonable access conditions. You should have checked before painting my property. The words hit harder because residents nearby were listening now. Not just hearing noise, but absorbing specifics. Easement. Property. Rights. Ownership. Legal language has weight when it shows up exactly as someone's authority starts collapsing. Rebecca sensed it too. Her posture stiffened. "You think you can hold an entire neighborhood hostage over parking spaces?" she asked loudly. I tilted my head slightly. This was never about parking spaces. That line settled into the crowd like a stone dropped into water. You could feel people mentally rewinding the last few days, realizing Rebecca's cheerful announcement about reclaimed parking might not have been as official as she made it sound. She stepped closer, so close I could smell expensive perfume fighting bitter coffee. "Open the gate." "Under access terms." "There are no access terms." "There are now." Another horn exploded behind her, followed by someone yelling her name from halfway down the line. That was the thing about public control. It feels powerful right until the public starts demanding results. Rebecca spun toward the cars. Everybody calmed down. Nobody calmed down. A delivery driver asked if he needed to call the county. A woman in workout clothes started recording Rebecca directly instead of the gate. Two men argued about reversing and trying another exit before realizing there was no other exit. Oak Ridge Pines only had one legal paved access route. Mine. Rebecca turned back toward me with a look I had never seen on her face before. Not superiority. Not smugness. Calculation mixed with the first trace of fear. What exactly do you want? She asked. I let the silence stretch. Temporary access fee, I said. $10 per vehicle until the property issues are resolved. The reaction was immediate. Angry murmurs. Sharp laughter. A curse from somewhere in the line. But under the outrage was something more important. Acceptance. Everyone understood one brutal practical fact. They still needed to leave. Rebecca's face tightened. You can't charge people to use a neighborhood road. I can charge for controlled access across private property under a retained easement agreement, especially after unauthorized use and alteration of adjacent property. Again, the specifics. Again, words she could not easily argue against without admitting she had acted without authority first. A black SUV near the front rolled forward. The driver lowered his window halfway and held up a 20. He looked like he hated every second of this, but hated being late more. Rebecca stared at him like he had betrayed her personally. I stepped to the keypad, entered the code, and the gate slid open exactly enough for one vehicle. The SUV rolled through. I handed back $10 change. Then the gate closed again. The entire crowd watched it happen. That was the moment the situation became real. Not theoretical. Not negotiable. Operational. Another car immediately pulled forward. Then another. Rebecca looked around as residents handed over cash, and I could see humiliation spreading through her nervous system. Every transaction weakened her position. Every driver choosing efficiency over solidarity was a vote against her authority. You're seriously paying him? She barked at a man in a blue sedan. He shrugged helplessly. I have court in 40 minutes, Rebecca. Another resident muttered. Maybe the board shouldn't have painted somebody else's lot. That one hit hard. I saw it in her eyes. The narrative was slipping. By 7:30, the line finally began thinning, but the damage to Rebecca's image was already done. People were no longer looking to her for answers. They were looking to me for access. Around 8 o'clock, a white county SUV pulled up near the shoulder with the municipal seal on the door, and the mood changed instantly. Residents quieted. Phones lifted higher. Rebecca straightened like reinforcements had arrived. A middle-aged inspector stepped out carrying a clipboard and wearing the exhausted expression of a man who had spent 20 years dealing with other people's property disputes. Rebecca moved toward him immediately, talking fast, pointing at the gate, pointing at me, explaining obstruction, delays, danger, liability, framing herself as the responsible authority, trying to restore order. I stayed silent and watched the inspector instead of her because experienced officials rarely care who talks louder. They care who prepared better. The inspector examined the gate first. Not Rebecca. Not me. The gate. He checked the permit plate, the emergency shoulder, the hinges, the motor housing, the post placement. Then he turned to me. You the property owner? Yes. You have the easement documents? I handed him the certified copies. Rebecca's expression shifted when she saw the stamps. Serious people prepare records before confrontations. The inspector read quietly for nearly 2 full minutes while traffic crept through one car at a time behind him. Nobody interrupted him. Even Rebecca knew better. Finally, he nodded. Installation is compliant. Rebecca jumped in. But he's interfering with neighborhood access. The inspector looked back down at the easement. Property owner retains conditional access management rights provided emergency ingress and egress remain available. Then he looked directly at Rebecca, which appears to be the case. Silence spread so fast you could hear engines idling again. Rebecca blinked twice. You're saying he can do this? The inspector shrugged. I'm saying the recorded easement gives him broader retained authority than most HOA access agreements. If the association has concerns, that becomes a civil matter. Civil matter. Those 2 words drained half the fight out of the entrance. The county was not riding in to save Rebecca. There was no instant override. No official declaring me unreasonable. This was exactly what I wanted it to be, a documented legal imbalance created by the HOA's own overreach. But then the second dangerous moment arrived. A resident near the middle of the line shouted that an elderly woman on Birch Hollow Lane had a medical appointment and could not wait. Another shouted that if an ambulance needed to enter, I would be responsible. A third called me greedy. For the first time that morning, the crowd began turning not against Rebecca, but against the inconvenience itself. That was the risk. People love justice until it delays them. Rebecca heard it too, and for one brief second, her face sharpened with hope. She turned to the crowd. Exactly. This is reckless. He is punishing all of you because he has a personal issue with the board. The words landed. A few people nodded. The balance trembled. I stepped toward the gate, held up the fire department lockbox confirmation, and addressed the residents instead of Rebecca. Emergency access is already coordinated. Medical, fire, police, and county vehicles can pass. Residents can pass under temporary terms. The only thing stopped here is the HOA's assumption that private property becomes community property because Rebecca says so. That last sentence shifted the air back. A woman near the front folded her arms and looked at Rebecca. Did you check the deed before painting his lot? Rebecca did not answer, and that silence saved me more than any argument could have. By mid-morning, the story had spread through Oak Ridge Pines. Phones were everywhere. Videos hit the neighborhood Facebook group. Someone posted drone footage of the cars waiting at the gate. Comments exploded. Did the HOA really steal his parking lot? Rebecca said the land belonged to the community. Apparently it doesn't. We paid dues for this. Honestly, she deserves it. That last category grew fastest, because underneath every HOA dictatorship is a quiet collection of people waiting for proof the bully can bleed. Around noon, Rebecca tried a different strategy. She marched toward me carrying a thick binder, 2 board members trailing like nervous interns. The association attorney will be contacting you, she announced. Good, I said. That threw her off. You understand you're damaging property values? You painted my property without authorization. This road has served the community for decades. Through a retained easement you never updated. The board acted in good faith. The board trespassed. One board member visibly winced. Rebecca noticed too. Tiny fractures were forming. Publicly confident leaders hate visible hesitation from their own people. You're enjoying this, she said quietly. It was the first honest thing she had said. I thought for a second. No, I said. I'm correcting it. That answer bothered her more than revenge would have. Revenge can be framed as emotion. Correction sounds necessary. By late afternoon, as the asphalt shimmered under the heat and residents kept adapting to the gate, Rebecca finally walked toward me alone. No board. No clipboard. No performance. She stopped beside the keypad and looked down the road into Oak Ridge Pines, the same road she had probably crossed 1,000 times without questioning who owned it. What are your terms? She asked quietly. There it was. The sentence she never imagined saying when she painted those parking lines. First, I said, every unauthorized sign and parking marker comes off my property by tomorrow morning. She said nothing. Second, the HOA reimburses surface repair costs and signs a formal acknowledgement of ownership boundaries. Her jaw tightened. Third, we renegotiate the easement properly. Maintenance participation. Liability allocation. Usage conditions. Everything documented. Rebecca stared at the gate. And if we refuse? I looked directly at her. Then the temporary access system becomes permanent until the courts settle it. The truth landed hard because she knew exactly how ugly that would become. Legal fees, resident outrage, public records, discovery, board liability, election fallout. She had painted parking lines expecting applause. Instead, she had dragged the entire neighborhood into a legal choke point she could not control. Behind her, another horn sounded. Rebecca closed her eyes briefly, inhaled through her nose, then opened them again. The signs will be removed, she said. That was the first surrender. Small, controlled, real. I nodded and entered the code. This time, the gate opened fully instead of partially, sliding back with a smooth mechanical hum that echoed through the entrance like a verdict. Residents drove through slowly because everybody was watching us. Watching Rebecca stand beside the gate, she failed to stop. Watching me operate the system she accidentally created. Watching the balance of power in Oak Ridge Pines rearrange itself in broad daylight. The workers started removing HOA signs from my parking lot at 7:08 the next morning. The sound of bolts rattling loose from asphalt carried farther than you would think in the early quiet. Residents slowed as they passed, pretending not to watch while very obviously watching. Rebecca stood near the edge of the lot with 2 board members and a contractor, arms folded tightly enough to look rigid instead of composed. 2 days earlier, she had walked onto my property smiling like a queen touring conquered land. Now she could barely look at me. HOA reserved parking disappeared into the back of a work trailer. The painted numbers still needed grinding and resealing, but seeing those signs come down felt symbolic, like watching someone erase graffiti from a monument after finally admitting it never belonged there. By 9 o'clock, photos of the removal were spreading online. Side-by-side screenshots compared Rebecca's original announcement with workers dismantling everything less than 3 days later. The comments were brutal. So the HOA didn't own it? Rebecca said legal review was completed. This is embarrassing. We paid dues for this. The most damaging comments were not the angry ones. They were the disappointed ones. Angry residents create conflict. Disappointed residents create leadership change. Around noon, the HOA attorney called. His voice had the careful, exhausted tone of a man who had spent the morning discovering his client left out important details. We discussed the easement, the lot, the unauthorized alterations, and the gate. He asked for records. I sent certified scans within 20 minutes. 2 hours later, he called back, sounding less confident. The association would like to pursue a cooperative resolution, he said. Cooperative. Another word people suddenly discover after arrogance stops working. We scheduled a formal meeting for Friday evening at the Oak Ridge Pines Clubhouse. Rebecca insisted on attending personally. Of course she did. People like her always believe they can recover control in a room through presence, pressure, and performance. But public failure changes the atmosphere around someone permanently. Once enough people see authority collapse, they stop responding to it automatically. Friday night, the clubhouse filled faster than anyone expected. Residents lined the walls. Extra folding chairs appeared. Phones sat openly on tables recording everything despite repeated requests from the board secretary to keep the meeting orderly. Nobody listened. The energy felt electric before a single word was spoken because everyone knew they were not really there to discuss an easement anymore. They were there to witness accountability. Rebecca sat at the front beside the HOA attorney wearing another immaculate white blouse and the same controlled expression she used during violation hearings, but the effect was gone. Too many people had already seen her powerless at the gate. Too many had watched her lose. Her authority no longer entered the room ahead of her. It had to walk in beside her like everybody else. The HOA attorney opened carefully, discussing historical misunderstandings regarding property boundaries and shared community assumptions. Several residents laughed. Historical misunderstandings. Amazing how trespassing transforms once consequences appear. Then he outlined the proposed settlement. Full acknowledgement of my property ownership. HOA-funded resurfacing and repainting of the damaged lot. Formal renegotiation of the access easement with updated maintenance obligations. Legal reimbursement for permit and installation costs tied to the temporary gate. Mandatory board review procedures for future property-related decisions. Clean. Professional. Expensive. The room stayed quiet while he spoke, but it was not supportive quiet. It was the silence of people waiting for the real question. Finally, someone in the back asked it. Who approved painting his property without verifying ownership? Every head turned toward Rebecca. She adjusted in her chair. The board acted based on long-standing community use patterns. A man near the wall folded his arms. That's not what he asked. Murmurs spread. Rebecca's jaw tightened. The board relied on internal records indicating. Did anybody check the deed? Another resident interrupted. Silence. Tiny. Sharp. Deadly. Rebecca glanced toward the attorney. He did not rescue her. Attorneys protect liability, not pride. The property was believed to be common use adjacent space, she said finally. A woman near the front raised her eyebrows. Believed by who? More murmurs. More shifting. The room changed from curiosity to pressure. Rebecca tried to recover. The important thing is that we are resolving the matter professionally. Wrong answer. A resident stood immediately. Professionally? We had people trapped behind a gate because the HOA painted somebody else's property without checking ownership. Applause broke out. Actual applause. Rebecca's expression froze for half a second before she forced it neutral again, but the damage was done. Public meetings run on momentum, and she had just lost it completely. Then another resident stood. Then another. Suddenly, it was not only about me. It was about fines, selective enforcement, threats, landscaping letters, mailbox violations, holiday decorations, and months of buried resentment finally finding an opening. You threatened me over holiday lights. You fined my mother while she was in the hospital. You approved your own patio extension without review. You told residents nobody could challenge board authority. Each comment hit harder because it was public now. Witnessed, recorded, shared. Rebecca tried interrupting twice before realizing every interruption made the room louder. Her attorney leaned toward her and whispered something. I saw her shoulders stiffen. He was telling her to stop fighting the room. She couldn't. People like Rebecca never know how to surrender gradually. They only know escalation. Finally, she looked directly at me. You engineered this, she said. Not loudly. Personally. The room went quiet. I met her eyes. No, I said. You did when you painted my property. That line landed like a hammer because everyone knew it was true. Every consequence traced back to that first act of arrogance. The gate. The embarrassment. The legal exposure. The resident backlash. The meeting itself. She created all of it the moment she assumed ownership without confirming reality. Rebecca looked around the room slowly, and for the first time since I had known her, I saw something beneath the performance. Fear. Real fear. Because she finally understood this was no longer about recovering authority. It was about surviving politically. The board treasurer cleared his throat and announced a formal review of leadership procedures at the next monthly meeting. Another board member added that transparency reforms were being discussed. Translation, they were already distancing themselves. Rebecca heard it too. Nobody defended her. Not one person. Not even the board members who had voted with her. Self-preservation moves quickly once blame becomes visible. The settlement passed overwhelmingly by resident vote. As people filed out, conversations buzzed through the clubhouse like electricity. Residents stopped me near the door to apologize, shake my hand, and tell me they admired how calmly I handled everything. A few even laughed about the gate now that the crisis had passed. Honestly, one older man said quietly, somebody needed to humble her. Rebecca remained seated at the front table while the room emptied around her. Papers stacked neatly beside her. White blouse perfect. Expression neutral. But neutrality cannot hide isolation after a collapse that public. I was almost at the exit when she stood and walked toward me. No audience. No board. No performance. Just the two of us under dim recessed lighting near the clubhouse doors. She stopped a few feet away. You could have sued the association immediately, she said. Probably. You could have buried us in legal fees. Probably. She looked down briefly, then back up. Why didn't you? I thought about the question honestly because by then the anger had burned off, leaving only clarity. Because court would have taught you paperwork, I said. This taught you limits. She absorbed that in silence. Somewhere outside, a car door closed and tires rolled slowly across pavement. You enjoyed watching me lose control, she said. No, I answered. I enjoyed watching reality catch up. That answer stayed with her. I could tell. She nodded once after a long pause, not in agreement, but in recognition. Then she stepped past me and walked alone into the parking lot. 2 weeks later, the resurfacing crew finished restoring my property completely. Fresh seal. Clean striping exactly the way I wanted it. No HOA markings. No numbered spaces. No signs pretending ownership into existence. The gate remained too, though under the revised easement it stayed open during standard hours and locked automatically overnight with emergency override access and documented terms. The HOA paid quarterly maintenance contributions after that, right on schedule. Funny how organizations suddenly become efficient once consequences become expensive. Rebecca resigned as HOA president less than a month later. Officially, she cited personal stress and community hostility. Unofficially, nobody would follow her anymore. Authority depends on belief, and once residents watched her stand powerless at that gate while cars lined up behind her, the belief never recovered. A quieter board replaced her. Fewer violation letters went out. Meetings became shorter, friendlier, more careful. Funny how quickly systems soften after people remember power has limits. Every now and then, someone in Oak Ridge Pines still jokes about the toll booth incident. New residents hear versions of it at cookouts or during walks around the pond. Some details get exaggerated. Some people claim the gate trapped the neighborhood for days. Others say Rebecca screamed at county officials. Stories grow over time. That is normal. But the important part always stays accurate. The HOA crossed a property line they never bothered to verify, and the man they underestimated controlled the only road home. About 6 months later, I saw Rebecca one last time outside a hardware store on the other side of town. She walked out carrying a small box of gardening supplies and noticed me immediately. For 1 second, neither of us moved. Then she gave a small nod. Not warm, not cold, just acknowledgement stripped clean of ego. I nodded back. No anger left. No victory lap needed. Because the real ending had already happened long before that moment. It happened when the gate closed for the first time, and an entire neighborhood realized authority means absolutely nothing when it is built on assumption instead of fact. The white paint Rebecca laid down that morning probably felt permanent while it dried under the sun. Bold lines. Official signs. Public confidence. But ownership does not care about appearances. It waits quietly beneath them, patient and solid, until someone arrogant enough mistakes silence for weakness. And once that mistake is made, the collapse usually begins long before anyone hears the gate lock behind them.